Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this update. I'm very sorry that I'm unable to join the conference next week in person. So I'd really like to thank ISPE and especially Linda for this opportunity to join you today and to give this update live. We had discussed beforehand that it would be a recorded presentation, but I think it's much better as a speaker and maybe also for you as audience members to have a live interaction. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join me today for this session. I hope that you'll find this remote session informative, interactive, and useful. I'm going to give you an update today on what the EMA, through its GMP GDP Inspectors Working Group, are currently working on in relation to supply chain oversight and supervision. So I'd just like to make a couple of disclaimers before I start. First of all, and most importantly, I don't have any conflict of interest with any of the subjects that I'm going to present today. All the views that I will express today are my own views and not those of any drafting group or the inspectors working group. And in the interest of transparency, now that AI is coming all over the place and everyone is using it, I thought I would just declare that I did generate a couple of graphics, those little blue graphics that you see, and some of the little green graphics were generated with Copilot. All the rest of the content was generated with my own, maybe not so good intelligence, but let's see how we go. So what the work I'm going to present to you today is really the work of a lot of committed and talented people, both in the EMA and also in the Medicines Regulatory Network. And pictured here are some of my colleagues from the Inspectors Working Group, both members and observers. And I'd like you also maybe to imagine another group, roughly the same size of people, who are also contributing to the development of GMP guidance. These experts come from our member states, but also from PICS participating authorities. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of those colleagues for their generous contribution of their time and expertise to the work that we are doing at the Inspectors Working Group and at the agency. The Inspectors Working Group itself is composed of 40 members from the EEA, the European Economic Area, Human and Veterinary GMP Inspectorates. We have observers from 17 countries who attend meetings. And we also have observers from 3 international organizations, WHO, PICS, and EDQM, who also observe our meetings. And you can find more information at our website. So in terms of the work we do, there are many different ways to look at the way the IWG works. And for this conference, I kind of thought I'd take a look at it thematically and look at its central role in safeguarding quality and supporting supply chain resilience. And there are a few, maybe 5 key thematic areas where the work of the IWG can be classified in to meet this objective. And today I'm going to focus on those areas on this slide that are highlighted in red. So today I'm going to talk about how we, as a group, are working together to harmonize, strengthen, and modernize quality oversight, inspections oversight by modernizing the GMP and GDP standards. I'm going to talk about how we contribute to enhancing supply chain integrity. And I'm really going to focus here on improvements we're making to the EudraGMDP database, but also take a look at some work we're doing on GDP. We're also working on preparing for future challenges. And you may be aware that there are a number of legislative packages passing through Europe the European legislator that affect the pharmaceutical sector. And of course, inspectors have a role, a small role, in implementing some of those legislative changes. So I'd like to highlight those to you today. And then finally, our interactions with stakeholders are very important. We have a broad range of stakeholders. And today I'd like to highlight how important it is for us to engage with you, the industry, to get your views and expertise on the work that we are doing so that we can hopefully meet your needs in terms of good guidance that can be applied consistently across the supply chain. So let's start with the modernisation of GMP guidance. And this is supposed to be an at-a-glance slide. I'm not sure if it really works that well, but you can see on the slide that the life cycle of a guideline across the top, from concept paper through to the revision process, and the different steps in each of those elements, from the planning through to the publication. And you'll see that we have roughly 3 groups of guidelines going through the life cycle at the moment. We have chapters 1 and 4, Annex 11 and 22, where we've have a draft guideline. We've had it out for consultation. We're now preparing a final guideline, which will go to the publication step. A little bit back from those, we have 4 guidelines that have gone through the concept paper phase. We've had a consultation. We're now drafting the initial guideline based on that consultation, and we're heading towards a public consultation on these 4 guidelines. And finally, then at the concept paper phase, you'll see that we have one annex, Annex 14 on plasma-derived medicines, which is at the concept paper phase. And then we have identified in our work plan 3 chapters of the GMP guide, chapters 3, 5, 7, and 9, where we intend to start work revising and modernizing these guidelines. So we have completed a major round of stakeholder consultation on draft guidelines, 4 draft guidelines, and on 4 concept papers. So let's see what kind of feedback we've received from stakeholders. This is a kind of a thematic map. It's not very accurate, but what it does show, I hope, is that we received input from a broad international stakeholder base with a strong contribution of, a strong concentration of contributions in Europe, of course, but we also received quite a lot of comments from North America and other key pharmaceutical markets, including Asia. And I think the high volume of responses that we received, about 6,500 comments, demonstrates a strong level of interest and engagement within the industry. And I think certainly from my perspective, one of the key takeaways was that the comments were very much welcoming the IWG's objective to modernize the GMP guide. So we think there is good alignment between what we are trying to do and what you would like to see. So in terms of where we are with these guidelines, so you can see on the table here, the first 4 are the more advanced guidelines, chapters 1, 4, 11, and 22. We obviously received the most comments on those. And let me just say that we do review every comment submitted in the stakeholder consultation process. We mightn't accept all of them, but we do review them. And you can see in the middle column on the table the current status of that review. We have almost completed our review of all of the comments, that we have received for the first 4. Where we have just started Annex 11 just before the summer break, so we expect that to proceed over the next few months. And also we have, I think, pretty much completed all of the comments that we received on the concept papers. So drafting status is ongoing and in some cases advanced, where we have almost finalized a draft. So we continue to expect that we will make very good progress in terms of updating the guidelines. And then, maybe just to reflect on the overall summary from the stakeholders in the consultation. Again, I think just to reiterate that high response volume indicate and that kind of general appreciation that was expressed in the comments for the direction that we are taking. I think to go into more detail, there was a lot of support for us looking at things like artificial intelligence, digitalization and digital technology integration, our focus on quality systems, quality risk management and life cycle management. But, some of the comments, I think, made good points, particularly around being more proportional. So in terms of perhaps the level of detail, the level of prescription that may have been in some of the drafts, maybe to look at reducing that, making the expectations clear, so more clarity and consistency between the drafts themselves and the other parts of the GMP framework. So I think we got a lot of really good comments that I expect that we will review going forward into the next steps of the process. But nevertheless, I just want to reiterate our objective to deliver that coherent and practical framework that works both for inspectors who can use it to inspect, but also manufacturers who want to apply it to comply with the requirements. And maybe I'd like to just illustrate how we are extending our stakeholder consultation in some key areas to draw on expertise in the industry. And this, if I could just reflect on our Annex 22 expert workshop that we held quite recently in June, at the end of June. Some of you may have followed it online or may even have been in the room. And so from the comments we received during the stakeholder consultation, it was clear that there was an overall view from the industry that Annex 22 needed to allow for the use of generative AI and probabilistic AI in GMP functions where that function may affect patient safety, product quality, or data integrity. So I think we're all very familiar with some of the downsides of AI in terms of hallucination, fabrication, bias. So our drafting group thought that it would be very useful to have an expert workshop with industry experts who could set out perhaps how quality risk management, together with safeguards, guardrails in AI, could protect patient safety, product quality, data integrity. So that workshop took place, as I said, at the end of June, beginning of July. And we have written a meeting report. We intend to circulate that to industry participants very shortly, just to get their comments on it. And then it should be published. I don't want to put a time on it, but soon, together with the recording of the meeting, so you will be able to look back on the proceedings. And of course, we intend to use this meeting then to inform the Annex 22 guidance development and finalise the text taking into account this workshop. And but the conversation on AI is not over at the agency or within the Annex 22 drafting group. And there is in November a roundtable meeting being hosted by the Quality Innovation Group, which is to look at digitalization and AI in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And really the focus here, it's on how advanced digital and AI approaches can be used across development, manufacturing, supply chains, quality control, quality systems. But the focus is really on case studies. So we want to see case studies from the industry, use cases where these kind of technologies are being used or where you would like to use them. So for example, in real-time release testing, where you're using digital twins, Internet of Things, and so on. And the idea here is that through this roundtable, we may be able to identify implementation challenges, how we can mitigate those kind of changes or mitigate risks identified, and then lessons that can inform our future regulatory discussions on the regulator side. So I think there has been a call sent. I think it was by invitation only, and we are planning to have that meeting in November, and I believe that meeting will be also broadcast. Just to finish up on the GMP side and in terms of guidance, in the last 2 years, the Inspectors Working Group has updated and issued new guidance in various areas. We issued 3 Q&As in 2025, beginning with an update of our Q&As on Annex 8 in relation to the sampling of and testing of glycerol and other excipients. We also issued an update on auditing for API manufacturers and the QP declaration with an emphasis there on managing and mitigating conflict of interest. And finally, in 2025, we issued a Q&A on certification by the European Qualified Person. This year, we have issued 2 Q&As, a Q&A on 3D printing, which was developed with the Quality Innovation Group, and that was issued at the beginning of March. And then just most recently, we issued a Q&A interpreting Chapter 5 of the GMP Guide on contamination control of non-sterile products. And all of those Q&As can be found on our website. So then I'd like to just briefly advise you on the modernization of EudraGMDP. Many of you may use EudraGMDP in one way or another, and it's a very important database used, of course, within Europe by regulators and industry, but also I believe it's also referred to by international regulators across the globe. So very important database. It's quite old now. It's starting to show its age. And we have launched a modernization exercise to first of all, do some work behind the scenes to make sure that EudraGMDP can continue to function for many years. And then most importantly, I think for you, is that we are working on modernizing the user interface and the user experience. It's still not going to be brilliant, but I think it's going to be pretty good when you compare it with today. And you can see on this slide that we have already reached out to industry through user experience interviews. And later this year, we will also be involving industry in some of the user acceptance testing. Next year, we hope to go live with EudraGMDP and finally decommission the legacy system at the end of next year. And this is what it will look like for those of you who use EudraGMDP. I think the major change will be that you will be able to do searches across all the domains of EudraGMDP. So a single search giving you a single set of results, whereas right now you may have to do 3 or 4 different searches. So hopefully this will greatly improve the user experience for those of you using the database. In terms of GDP, we have at the IWG formed an inspectors drafting group to work on GDP topics. And really, this group is working in 3 key areas. One to do with a procedure on dealing with serious non-compliance with GDP. One on a risk-based planning approach for GDP inspections. And finally, a guidance for wholesalers on verification of authenticity. And I believe these are the kinds of procedures we need in Europe to develop a stronger harmonized approach across Europe on GDP inspection and enforcement. Then I think I'd like to say a few words about how we are looking now to implement the new legislation that we are facing. On this slide, you can see there are 7 separate pieces of legislation that have come true from 2024 until some maybe 2028 that will have an impact on manufacturing quality, supply chains, and where inspectors will have a role to a greater or lesser extent, depending on which piece of legislation it is, in implementation. Today, I'd like to focus on 2 of these. The variation regulation, which has entered into force in 2024, and then have a look ahead to the new pharmaceutical legislation for human medicines, which may enter into force at the end of this year. So the variation regulation was a very important step in the European regulatory system, because it allowed, or it will allow, for the use of Q12, ICH Q12, one of the key elements of ICH Q12 by pharmaceutical companies in Europe going forward into the future. And that new element is the Product Lifecycle Change Management document, the PLCM. And the PLCM, it's envisaged as a global tool for life cycle management, containing a central repository of the legally binding elements considered necessary to ensure product quality. And this is why we needed to have that legislative change in Europe before we could start to implement Q12. And one of the key elements of Q12 then is around PQS effectiveness. And we have started a pilot program to see how we in Europe can evaluate this concept of PQS effectiveness, and can we come up with a European approach that would allow us then to support global development across the medicine's life cycle. And so we have looked at this PICS paper, how to evaluate and demonstrate the effectiveness of a PQS in relation to risk-based change management. And the IWG have agreed to launch a pilot in March this year, where inspectors will inspect site change control and change management processes against the requirements of the EU GMP guide, but using the PICS PQS paper as supportive guidance. And this pilot will run until the end of March. We had very positive feedback from industry around the aims of this pilot and the way we are approaching it. I think we have about 8 different companies in the pilot so far. It's still open, so if you are interested in supporting this, please do reach out to us, and you can find more information on the EMA's website. The second piece of legislation then is the new pharmaceutical legislation. And this legislation, amongst other things, touches on manufacturing and inspection topics. And I've highlighted on this slide here 6 key areas where there will be changes for regulatory authorities, and in some cases manufacturers and qualified persons. And so these topics include the concept of decentralized manufacturing or point of care, which is probably the most significant change for manufacturers. It brings in a new manufacturing framework, allowing much closer to the patient manufacturing. The legislation brings in a new concept, but one in which I think already exists, the idea of a system of supervision. The other key change that you may see in the future will be that the EMA will have its own inspectorate and will carry out inspections in certain circumstances. So you may see in the future, particularly in those facilities outside the EEA, you may see an inspector from the EMA itself. The role of the Inspectors Working Group will change. And then there's some changes in the master file procedures, a number of new master file procedures with inspections foreseen in all of those. So maybe I can conclude to say that there's going to be a lot of change, especially for authorities, and this will require a lot of implementation activity. I think as well we will see additional guidance, probably, certainly, I think some updated GMP guidance coming after implementation of the legislation. So finally, I'd just like to conclude, and maybe I've gone over time, I'm not too sure, but I'd just like to conclude by highlighting how the IWG interacts with stakeholders, with industry associations. We use a mix of meetings, consultations, workshops, pilots so far. So I think we are becoming better at reaching out and having more meaningful dialogue with industry. And, you know, it seems to me that this kind of work improves the feasibility and implementation of the guidelines that we are developing. So we have an annual interested parties meeting. We do, from time to time, host topic-specific meetings. We have had 2 such meetings this year with interested parties where we briefed them on particular topics. We also, of course, have our stakeholder consultations, which I've mentioned already. And then the workshops, the expert meetings, such as the Annex 22 meeting, and then the pilots, which I think are quite important because it allows us to test our ideas before rollout. So again, I just like to underline that, in my opinion, the stakeholder input is very welcome, and it strengthens the quality of what we are going to do and helps us in the implementation. So I think I'd just like to conclude then by saying that the IWG take action to safeguard product quality and support supply chain resilience, I beg your pardon. And these are the key areas. And I hope that I have illustrated how much work is going on and how much we are reaching out to stakeholders to get their input. So I think with that, I'm going to conclude this presentation, and I hope there will be some questions, Bob and V and colleagues. So thank you very much, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Brendan. A very interesting presentation. There's obviously a lot of work happening at EMA, particularly in the area of GMP, new legislation, EudraGMP database. So, Dr. V, I'll hand over to you with some questions to ask for Brendan.
Okay, Brendan, that was really interesting. See the perspective and how things are moving on in Europe in general, and all the effort put done. So, starting having the questions ahead. Indeed, the EMEA, along with all the EU authorities, have shown an impressive amount of quality work towards harmonization and solving supply chain problems for many years, as you have shown to us. To what extent all these new requirements provide efficient solutions for the shortages of medicines that are still hitting the European countries? Has there been any efficiency control of all that, if possible, to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very big area, of course, and the agency, together with the Commission and the member states, have been working for many years, as you know, on tackling shortages. And I think it's important, maybe, for me to say that we have to recognize there are different root causes for different shortages, and there are, economic causes, of course. Companies make commercial decisions, reimbursement, pricing, all of those kind of areas, which are not really in our remit as inspectors, in terms of what we do, or indeed in what the agency does, because we don't really contribute to the reimbursement question. It's so I think what we're trying to do is really apply a focus on risk management, on understanding the vulnerabilities of supply chains, to make sure that companies and regulators are taking action to prevent the shortages in the first place. And so you may have seen just yesterday, the agency issued new updated supply prevention plan guidance. I think legislation will enter into force next year around that. So I think this emphasis on prevention is going to be key. And it's something I've talked about for many years, as you know, is, for manufacturers to really understand their supply chains, to understand the vulnerabilities, and to proactively manage those risks. And of course, we pushed for ICHQ9 or 1 to include elements of risk assessment for vulnerabilities in the supply chain. And now we are updating Chapter 1 of the GMP Guide to implement some of those elements. So I would say, it's a collection of measures and efforts working together with across the network and with manufacturers and marketing authorization holders to really get the focus on the supply chain and to ensure that medicines continuously reach patients. Many years ago, I was very fortunate to present at a patients working group here at the EMA, and I asked them, what do you want from the industry in terms of medicines? And they said, well, we'd really like our medicines to be like electricity. When we want them, that they are there. And we don't really mind too much how the industry is doing it, or the challenges the industry has to overcome. So I think, okay, I understand that may be a little bit difficult for people, but that's the voice of the customer, if you like. You know, what patients really want is to avoid any disruption in the continuity of supply of medicines, and that's what we're trying to achieve today.
I'm sure it's it's moving ahead all the time, and you
Yeah,
take all
yeah,
the appropriate measures. So it's
yeah,
really very positive for me,
yeah,
looking throughout all these years that we have also
yeah,
worked
yeah,
together. Yeah.
yeah.
Coming now to another question regarding the how much EMEA has emphasized international collaboration, reliance, and supply chain resilience, of course. And looking ahead to 2030, coming up in 4 years, do you
Mm.
believe we are moving towards a truly global inspection ecosystem where trusted inspections are accepted across multiple regulatory authorities, or will national regulatory requirements continue to limit that vision? What do you see in that? Because you just mentioned that I just realized that EMEA will also have an inspectorate by itself. How is this going to work? If you can, please provide some information.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I think we are all moving in the direction of reliance and making more use of trusted authorities and information from trusted authorities. And so while I think maybe a global inspection ecosystem by 2030 maybe is a little bit ambitious, I do think the direction of travel is towards that kind of goal. Now, it may look a bit different, but I do think that is the where a lot of authorities are looking at, and how we can make use of the relationships that we have, and using inspectional information in our own decision making process to determine whether or not an inspection is needed. So, for example, the IWG ran a pilot where but it was a very successful pilot because we applied the PICS reliance procedure within the EU network, and we said, let's see if we can use this to rely upon inspections done by PICS member states in their own territory. And so we ran that for about a year. It allowed us to defer inspections because we were able to get the information that we needed, and that we could use in the decision making so that we could defer an inspection. So I think this is a really useful tool, the reliance procedure that was developed by PICS. And I think, yes, with this direction of travel towards increasing reliance, I think it will give us a lever to reach a goal where we are using much more reliance. Reliance won't replace inspections. It just means that perhaps you can use them to defer an inspection, extend your interval between inspections, maybe approve marketing authorization variations without the need for a prior approval inspection. So there are many ways you can use it. So I do see that is definitely one really positive development. I just like to also highlight that, I talked about all the guidelines. All those guidelines, we're working with PICS. So, we are making use of PICS inspectors, their expertise in developing our guidelines. So, that's also a reliance tool and part of that inspector ecosystem that you were thinking about.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, and I suppose it's going that way eventually.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so Bob,
Yes,
you
I
want
got a question, Brendan. How does the EMA see the future of regulatory reliance with ASEAN regulators and PICS members, particularly the non-EU PICS members? Will inspection reliance reduce the frequency of EU inspections of manufacturers in Southeast Asia? or will it be mainly influenced by inspection planning?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's very positive that many of the ASEAN members are PICS members. I think about 5 or 6, or maybe even more. I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with ASEAN. So I think that's a really great starting point. And that's going back to the point I made about the pilot, where we were able to use the PICS reliance procedure so that we could rely on inspections performed by PICS members in their own member state, on their own territory. And I think that's really important for us, that we prove that concept. And we have case studies that we have used. A number of those inspections were in Southeast Asia, maybe not too far from where the conference is going to be held. A number were in Singapore. So, I think the tool is there. It's just really up to us to have the willingness to use it. Now, our pilot did show that there are some downsides to, well, maybe not downsides, but some limitations. First of all, in terms of inspection scope, product scope, things like that. But then you start to run into things like exchange of confidential information, exchange of data, personal data, availability of translations. So you need to have confidentiality arrangements in place, and I think perhaps maybe that is the next layer that we need to make this global inspection convergence. Maybe a reality will be to have these kind of confidentiality measures in place to allow for the exchange of information.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, maybe, Bob, we should talk about the EudraGMDP at that point, if you want to.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, actually.
Yeah.
With this modernized EudraGMP database, will it eventually become more integrated with international regulatory databases outside Europe? And to what extent will PICS member authorities provide data to the database itself? Do you think the EudraGMP database is serving efficiently inspectors all over the world?
Yeah, so maybe if I start with that last question first,
Yeah.
maybe, because I think it does. I think, it seems to me anyway, the evidence that I have is that it's not just inspectors, it's assessors across the globe. Quality assessors in particular are looking at EudraGMDP and relying on the information that's in there. So I do think it is fulfilling an important role globally already. Now, in terms of who puts data in, at the moment, it's predominantly EU authorities, of course, who put the data in. We do have agreements with a couple of our MRA partners who have agreed to put data in for sites that are supplying the EU, for example. So I think there is a very good foundation there. But it remains to be seen to what extent we can leverage EudraGMDP for global cooperation. And there may be other alternatives. I know PICS have for years been talking about some similar kind of database to allow for exchange of information. And so it may be, a combination of that database, EudraGMDP, that might provide that information, or maybe even, I know ICMRA were looking at, as part of their PQKMS, to have a kind of an assessment platform that could perhaps integrate inspectional information into it. So, there's a range of different options available, and it may be a case of being able to pick from a choice, cherry picking a little bit maybe to what you need.
Yeah. And as far as an agency like TGA Australia, are they inputting data into the database?
Oh God! Now this, I'm not sure. I think they do. I think they do for sites in Australia that are exporting to Europe. I think they may be, but don't quote me on it. Don't quote me on it.
maybe this is
Yeah.
because Europe and Australia have an MRA.
Yeah, we
Probably
have
it's
an
not the-
MRA, and
Probably
yeah,
it's not the
so
same
it's
for other agencies.
it's obviously linked to the closeness of the trading relationships and the partnerships we have as well. Yeah.
So maybe in the future, something could be done to have more input into the database from other PICS authorities.
I think it's an interesting concept. As I said, PICS have been looking at this. It may be that EudraGMDP doesn't fit or meet the needs of all the PICS member states. It also may be that that may not meet the needs of the EU member states either. So I think, but it would be an interesting discussion, I think, to have.
It would really help Reliance across the board. Imagine if PICS had its database, EMA had its database, they talk to each other. It could be quite a useful resource.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Brendan, another one about this EMEA inspectorate that you mentioned? How will it work? Like another regulatory authority, or it will be in specific occasions that it will happen, or in cooperation with other inspectors from the member states?
Yeah, so let me start by giving another disclaimer that what I'm going to say is based on my reading of a text, which is not the final text. So don't hold me to this, but my understanding is that the agency inspectorate will be, being established to complement the European inspectorate. So it's an additional inspectorate to give additional capacity, and that capacity will be called upon when certain conditions are met. So in the sense that it won't be like an EU inspectorate who will be, issuing manufacturing authorizations, who will be doing inspections as part of that process, but it will be doing inspections as part of the centralized procedure with member states, where there will be where there is the need for additional capacity. So that's really the main function of it. But it will be like an EU member state in the sense that it will be able to issue GMP certificates.
Okay.
So and put those GMP certificates into EudraGMDP. So for that reason, the EMA will have to undergo the joint audit program, and perhaps maybe apply to PICS. But that's just me joking here. But that could be one of the consequences.
Yeah. Or it could be something like the WHO. Relevant.
Exactly. Yeah, there are models out there that can be applied. Yeah.
And the DQM, etc. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Coming to the digitalization, the AI, the Annex 22, this section, we see that a lot of companies are beginning now to use this generative AI for specific issues and the CAPAs, the deviations, the investigations, and so on. Does EMEA expect these applications to require validation comparable to other GXP computerized systems? I guess it does.
Yes. I mean, just today, Annex 11 applies to those systems.
Yeah.
Without talking about Annex 22 or anything, just today, normal GMP applies. So yes. Now, what we are doing is we are looking in. We are revising Annex 11, just coincidentally at the same time as there was this announcement about AI. Who can remember the first announcement from? I think it was OpenAI, not too long ago. It feels like another lifetime almost. But and so we thought it would be useful to spin out AI into its own annex, away from Annex 11. To have a different life cycle management approach. And in that we are looking at, providing more guidance in terms of the validation of those systems, around the use of the test data, for example. I can't go into the detail, but, that's really our purpose is, at the moment, Annex 11 is there. we recognize Annex 11. It's old. It's obviously it doesn't cover everything. So we're trying to come now with a new guidance to give more additional guidance to industry.
Yeah, of course. And of course, very similar is that, do you envisage a time where inspectors themselves will use AI tools to analyze large volumes of GMP data before or during inspectors? We noticed that MHRA has provided a special guidance on that, and for the industry, of course. So we see a way forward. Is this considered to take a guideline behind it or some instructions regarding that?
Yeah, I think the regulatory network in general is looking to make use of AI across the board, and at EMA there is a governance structure around how AI is going to be implemented across the network. So within the agency, within the competent authorities. So there is a strategy there. There is a governance structure. And anything that comes through on the inspection side will go through that governance structure as well. At the moment, I think, you can see the potential is there for things like analysis of deficiencies, for example, maybe use in risk-based inspection planning, and so on. And most importantly, in evaluation of stakeholder comments in guideline development, you saw the 6,500 comments we received. So I definitely think there's a tool there to be waiting to be developed. But I think, I started this talk with transparency. I used AI in my slides. I told you what I did. And I think as regulators, we have a duty to be transparent to the industry and to patients around how we're using AI, where we use it, what we use it for, what kind of protections we have in place around its use. So for me, these are the key kind of elements of how we can apply AI in a controlled manner, but at the same time to maximize the benefit of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Just a question on Southeast Asia in general, Brendan. Southeast Asia and Singapore in particular have become an increasingly important manufacturing hub for both innovative medicines and APIs. From an EMA perspective, what strengths do you see in manufacturers from this region, and what areas could be further strengthened?
Yeah, I don't have a huge knowledge on Southeast Asia or Singapore in particular, I'm afraid, but I do appreciate that Singapore, it's a center of excellence in terms of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing techniques. And, I think it's a very competitive competitor on the world stage in terms of attracting investment and developing innovation. So I think if I was going to point to anything, I would say Singapore is greatly helped by its very strong regulatory system and its medicines agency. I come from a small country, Ireland, which in turn has a very strong pharma industry. But what really helps that industry is having a good, strong regulator who provides consistency and ensures that the industry is following the GMP. So I think these kind of elements together create a very strong ecosystem.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's very, very indeed very helpful and promising, the fact that EMEA is also leading the path towards transparency and innovation and all these tools applied. And this is indeed from the patient point of view and the industry, I believe, and this cooperation with the industry, getting all the comments and receiving that. I wanted your personal opinion in something. After so many years that you have worked in the field of GMPs, what change has surprised you the most? either in industry or in regulatory practice. Do you have any personal feelings for something that came up or?
Yeah, I did see the question beforehand, so I had a chance to think about it. And the more you think about it, the deeper you go. And I start to get lost in the question. But really, I think, I just like to maybe highlight the rate of change is so fast. When I joined the agency in 2002, so it was even in this century, there was no iPhone. The iPhone didn't exist then. Our meetings were all in person. People came to the meetings with maybe 6 or 7 kilos of paperwork. They probably had an extra suitcase just to bring all the paperwork. When they got to the meeting, they were handed another suitcase full of paperwork. So I just think that the rate and pace of change, maybe it's not surprising, but it's really impressed me. And of course, how we as humans adapt to that and are able to implement it and deal with it is just incredible. So that for me is, not surprising, but the one thing that's hugely impressed me.
It's very impressive indeed. Yes, indeed. You're right. You're right. We were meeting back in 2002.
Yeah. Well, you used to come. Did you have an extra suitcase for all the paperwork?
I had my suitcase. Some kilos, 5-6 kilos of paper.
Yeah.
Coming in.
So now everything is on your iPhone or your iPad. So it's extraordinary, in a very short space of time, how far we've come.
Yeah. And further on, who knows? Big miracles.
Well, exactly. How far are we going?
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
the promise of AI. Yeah.
We're close to the end of our time, so I just want to thank you very much, Brendan, for a wonderful presentation and a great discussion, and also we wish you well with your new inspectorate.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Bob. Can I just say it's a great pleasure, as always, to share the platform with yourself and with V as well. It's just wonderful to see you both are still active, and it's a great honor.
And just remember that if EMA decides to become a member of PICS, V and I can consult to agencies who want to become members of PICS, so we can come and see you if you like.
We can provide consultancy.
Thank you very much. I'll take that under advisement.
Yeah. It was great to see you, and we hope to see you in Singapore, in fact, but maybe next year. Yeah.
Maybe next year. Yeah. Indeed.
Anyway, I've got to remind the audience that the ISPE Singapore conference is going to be taking place on the 19th to the 21st of August next week at Suntec Singapore. We look forward to welcoming all the attendees and visitors to this annual gathering of biopharma manufacturing professionals. And also another reminder that there are pre-conference workshops and site tours on the 19th of August. So with that, I'd like to end this very interesting session, and thank you, Brendan, once again, and thanks, V, for your help.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, ISPE. All the best. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, V.
Thank you.
Take care. See you next week.
Bye.
See you soon.